Broadcasting live from our studio in Boston, Solutions Review is proud to showcase HYCU and the Solution Spotlight, an exclusive webinar event.
I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and welcome to the Solution Spotlight featuring HYCU. The Solutions Review Spotlight series allows us to take a deeper dive into innovative technologies that are changing the way business gets done. And today, we're looking at a market-leading, multi-cloud backup and recovery solution that is delivering the full mix of data protection, migration, and disaster recovery. There are a multitude of ways to approach data protection, and in particular, backup and recovery for applications, data, and VMs from on-premises to public clouds. HYCU believes there's a better way than what some IT departments have had to deal with over the past few years, a way in which the experience that many in public cloud environments appreciate, but that are equally powerful for on-premises, private cloud, and physical environments. And today we're joined from Indianapolis, Indiana, by sales engineer at HYCU, Alan Holmes. Alan, thanks for being with us.
Doug, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Way I'd like to start, we're gonna walk through a few slides just to kind of get level set, and then walk right into the demo. And I know that's really the money part of the show. But I did want to start just by talking with you a little bit about your journey, because ultimately you're the one who's going to be presenting, and I know you've had an interesting career as a technical person. How did you kind of find HYCU, and what do you see as the opportunity from your perspective?
Some question. So yeah, you're exactly right. I got a couple decades worth of IT experience in terms of, sysadmin roles, network admin roles, keeping track of production, customer-facing, software as a service type environment, so forth. And I've touched a lot of different, type of technologies, a lot of breadth of knowledge, maybe not so much depth, but over that time, I've had to deal with data protection in a lot of different ways. And let's just say there's some interesting solutions out there, some a little more difficult to work with than others. And honestly, HYCU was one of those that was just like, wow, if they could have been doing this from the beginning. And so anyway, that was kind of a short version of my journey as to how I ended up here at HYCU.
Well, I know what you're talking about with what you're alluding to there, certainly, and obviously with hyperconvergence, the game is changing so fast that this is really an important event for us, because I think a lot of our audience are still trying to get their head around it, and really, every year they're making plans to take advantage of the opportunities, and HYCU certainly presents a solution that they should certainly consider in that planning. So why don't I step back, let you take over, walk through a few of the slides. I think we'll probably have 10 or 15 minutes of kind of a good overview, and then I'll jump back in, or I actually might not be able to control myself, and I might just jump in anyway, but we'll jump back into a demo, and then we'll certainly end up with a series of questions from our audience.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thanks so much, Doug. And you're exactly right. It was that kind of move to hyperconverged infrastructure that kind of is why HYCU exists, right? I'm guessing that a lot of people who are listening today, they either have never heard of us, or maybe they have heard of us and say, you guys are that backup solution for Nutanix, which, that second group is right. Would have been more correct a couple of years ago. We've definitely grown and expanded our support in the data center and in the cloud as well too. So, and that's kind of what this title slide here tries to illustrate with what we affectionately refer to as the piano keys. So starting down there in that lower right, that's exactly where we came from, right? Was this Nutanix world. What happened was we saw Nutanix really kind of revolutionizing the data center here with their hyperconverged infrastructure. And what we also saw was that a lot of the data protection vendors in that space were kind of trying to continue their model of bolting on functionality as the technology changed. They just kept trying to adapt kind of with what their old model was to some of the new technology. And what we looked at here, and you showed a video before we started here of Simon kind of addressing that, our CEO, and it was just that nobody was effectively integrating with this hyperconverged infrastructure that Nutanix was providing, right? So that was where HYCU came from. We wanted to be kind of that next gen data center protection kind of solution for those types of environments. So since then, of course, we've expanded our support for VMware, and then as you can see out here, the Google Cloud. Not long after our kind of success with Nutanix came about, Google reached out to us and said, "Hey, can you guys write a GCP solution for us?" And so we did exactly that. Not too long after that, Microsoft approached us and said, "We need something for Azure as well." And AWS right now is in development. We're expecting similar solutions that we have for Google and Azure to be available in Q1 next year. So that's maybe a little bit of background on where HYCU came from and who we are. Let me kind of maybe get a little bit more detail into this here. And that is kind of, where did we start? What did we see when Nutanix was kind of coming onto the scene and trying to see these other data protection vendors? And this is where we kind of were able to categorize them in one of three places. There were the legacy 3-tier solutions, right? These are the folks that have been backing up physical servers and workstations since the 80s and 90s. And had effectively kind of bolted on that technology or the functionality to try and protect virtualization as it came along, and then we're continuing to do so as hyperconverged came along. And then there were the vendors that had the backup appliances, the large storage and software combined appliances that effectively tried to back up all those environments in one single box. Those oftentimes were very expensive, hard to expand. Upgrades come, you have to rip and replace a lot of hardware, and it was very disruptive. And then this third group, what we refer to as Cloud Wash, and that's effectively taking these two first groups who took their solutions and put them on the other end of an internet connection and called it cloud. By the definition, maybe it is. We had a little bit of a different approach, though. We wanted to start with a clean sheet of paper. We wanted to say, no, we're not gonna build off of what has been done in the past. We want to start with the technology today and write something that is, absolutely dedicated to that particular solution, purpose-built for that solution. So that's really where it came from, because what we were seeing were these complex deployments in the data center, right? So you've got your Nutanix clusters, your VMware clusters, and in order to protect all those VMs and the applications on them, you'd have to deploy a backup server. And you can see that a lot of times for multiple jobs, these data mover proxies would have to be provisioned. Storage needed to be set off on the side, but there was a repository server in between. And if you were going to write to the cloud, you had to have a gateway server on-prem and something running in your cloud environment to receive the data. And it's a lot of pieces. And then on an enterprise scale, as you're moving those even further, you had to have another machine that was there to handle the backup management for multiple sites in an enterprise. You wanted reporting, that was another machine. And a lot of this stuff, it's just a lot of pieces, right? So which means that when upgrades are happening, you have to touch all of this. Every single one of these components has to be touched. It just, it's very, very, very costly and painful to maintain in a lot of cases. And on top of that, a lot of it was built on Windows, which, I don't think anybody listening here is surprised or shocked to hear, that's really the most targeted and attacked operating system in terms of ransomware, malware, viruses, things like that, right? And again, as I'd said already, a lot of this stuff was built on outdated architecture, stuff that had been written in the 80s and 90s that was just kind of being bolted onto. So again, HYCU's approach, a little bit different. Same data center here, right? All we are is a single VM that runs in your production environment. Simply deploy the VM as a virtual appliance. You can point us to whatever storage you want for the backups, right? We half jokingly say anything with an IP address, we can write backup data to you. So if you've got NAS storage, you can present us an NFS, an SMB, iSCSI window, S3. We can write to pretty much anything. And of course, we do have support for public and private cloud solutions as well too. So you can kind of take that backup data, write it to something local. And honestly, I've seen all kinds of things. People take old servers that are maybe out of support. They'll load them up with a bunch of cheap disk, install Linux on it, and here's an NFS partition. That's where my backups are going to reside. And then my offsite copy is going to be where I'm going to have my ultra compressed, deduped, immutability, all that stuff. That's where my super secure stuff is going to be, because I just need something close by fast. But on-prem, people do that on-prem as well. So anyway, the point is that we're pretty much target agnostic as far as that's concerned. Where do you want to write your backups? And we really want to let the organization make that decision. We don't want to lock you into some sort of vendor approved storage. So this is where HYCU really offers you a lot of flexibility. And beyond that, beyond just protecting those virtual machines, those business running machines, we also have an application centricity kind of focus. So not only are we trying to protect the machines, but we want to make sure that common applications that you're using. So if you've got Exchange, you've got Oracle, you're using SQL, those types of things, we can automatically discover and at an application consistent level protect those applications so that you can recover them quickly and without the need for database consistency checks and rebuilds and things like that, because they were backed up in a crash consistent state. So the other thing I do want to point out with this, and I know that these slides are really busy, and I certainly don't expect everybody to read all this. It's just trying to give you a high level picture, and we'll kind of dig into the details here in just a second. But one of the things that you'll know that's missing is all the little agents, the little software pieces that need to be installed on your VMs. And yes, we can effectively back up those VMs. We can protect these applications all without having to have any kind of a HYCU client or plug-in or anything like that running in your environment. And that's just, again, kind of a testament to the next gen kind of nature of things as we've tried to develop our solution to fit those next gen solutions. So that's it at the data center level there. Now, one of the things that I know is at the absolute forefront of everybody's mind, and I'm could guarantee that 90% of the people listening right now have this has come up in conversation. Everybody's talking about it now, ransomware, right? And as with anything that's IT security related, right? There's always layers. You've got your firewalls and your intrusion detection and your malware scanning and all that stuff that you have to do kind of on the front end of things. And there's layers throughout the infrastructure. And of course, the same is true for your backup solution. And HYCU's got you covered there too, right? So we've got a multi-layer approach here. First of all, we're not Windows based. For our on-prem solution, it's a lockdown Linux installation. You can't get to it. It's all done through web interface and so forth. Our cloud solution, which I'll touch on in just a minute here, is a true software as a solution server. It's not a machine that is running that has entry points. So I'll get into that in just a second of how that all works. But backup and patching. So our backups, our patching and hot fixes and things like that, they're extremely easy to deploy. So as a vulnerability might be found in a particular distribution of Linux, or if there's a component or something like that, we can release a hot fix, and in 5 minutes it's up and it's updated and protected against that vulnerability. And again, in the cloud side of things, we are a fully managed software solution as a service offering that we handle all of that for you as it's coming. Our engineering folks are handling all that patching on the back side of things. So on top of that, encryption, everything's encrypted in flight. You have the option of encrypting data on the storage as you're writing it. We have the ability to function in an air-gapped type solution. If you've got your architecture where you want your backup storage completely segregated from your production network, which is a really good idea, by the way, we integrate with all of that very easily. We make use of S3 targets that, we're expanding our worm support as well too for some of those S3 vendors. So you have those immutable copies of your backup data sitting out there on the storage that nobody can touch, including admins, super admins, and things like that. We also have the ability to detect abnormal behavior on your backups. So say, for example, you're doing VM backups on a particular server, and we start noticing that, between backups, maybe 1.5% of the data changes on there. And we kind of learn what that VM looks like. And then all of a sudden on this backup, we just saw like a 70% data change rate on that backup. That's unusual. So we can generate alerts to you to say, hey, you might want to take a look at this. Either somebody deleted a bunch of stuff, they added a bunch of stuff, or that VM has just got encrypted with ransomware. And so now you can kind of get an idea as to what might be going on in the environment from that aspect. We have all kinds of security measures, role-based security that allows, to protect you from the IT guy who's having a bad day, who maybe wants to decide that he's gonna trash the company on his way out. We have means to protect against that. I hate to bring it up, but
Well, I
It
mean,
happens, right?
honestly, this is an important part of this slide is incredibly important. A recent study came out that said, I believe it's 1 in 5 companies have been victimized by ransomware,
Yeah.
and so you know you can't underestimate this. This is a real challenge and one that needs to be dealt with.
100%. It's absolutely right, and we're hearing more and more of it. As we talk to companies around the world, really. I mean, we've actually had a few instances in the last couple of years of companies that were HYCU customers who had ransomware hit their environment, and in each of those 3 cases that I can think of off the top of my head, and these case studies are on our website if anybody wants to take a look at them. HYCU was the only thing essentially left running in the environment, and we were able to recover. At least on 2 of the 3 occasions I know, just within a few hours, we were able to get their critical business critical machines up and running again.
Well, and it's also just not affecting a particular type of company. I mean, it's large, small, medium.
Yep.
It really is the full range of company size and let's face it, vertical as well.
Yep. Manufacturing, banking, healthcare, it doesn't matter. They're hitting everybody. Totally agree. Just the last couple of things here in terms of ransomware protection. We do have a new tool that's actually just was released a couple months ago in our on-prem version, where you can automatically test your backups. Little automation tool that you say, hey, every month or every 6 months or whatever it is you want to say, I want you to restore these VMs to the sandbox location, bring them on, run a suite of tests against them, give me a report, shut them down and delete them, give me the red light, green light. Kind of results, basically assuring that the backups that you've been dutifully making are any good, right? So that's kind of a cool feature. And then lastly, what we call our enhanced 3-2-1 backup rule, right? 3 copies of your data, 2 different formats, one of them which is offsite. We have the additional, layer, if you want to put it in there, just with Nutanix, the fact that their snapshots are immutable. We have them on immutable storage. So kind of a cool protection there. So I know this is a key piece that we always want to talk to, and we'll talk a little bit more about it too here as we get into the software. But the last thing I just wanted to mention in terms of HYCU functionality, and this is where we're going to start bridging that gap between on-prem into the cloud, right? It's what we call Protege. And this is where you take those VMs, that the data that you've been backing up here in your data center, writing out to storage. If you're writing it out here to cloud storage, we have the ability right now today, like I said, remember that very first slide with the goofy piano keys. We have the ability today to do this in Azure and Google, and AWS will be coming very shortly, but we can take that backup data that you've been just writing to that blob storage or object storage out in the cloud. We can actually convert it and spin up a native Azure or native GCP VM instance, workload, whatever the particular environment calls them, from that at-rest data. We have the ability to using APIs and things like that, and you control the access in terms of service accounts or service principals and things like that in the cloud to convert that at-rest data to a running VM. This is a great, we've seen a couple of use cases, people who are starting their journey essentially to the cloud. They're looking at moving some of their workloads into the cloud environment. This is a great migration path, a great way to test that migration. Will this stuff run? What changes do we have to make? The other thing that we've seen is for honestly availability of a DR situation in the cloud, right? Don't want to pay for a co-location facility, don't want to have to deal with a full-blown hot, cold data center failover kind of situation, but we need to be able to recover our critical VMs. Out of the 250 that we're running, these 25 are like, we absolutely have to have these running. This is a great solution for that. And we've seen great success with this solution, especially in like the Southeast US, right? IT guys sitting there on a Tuesday afternoon looking at the weather reports, staring down the barrel of a hurricane that's supposed to hit end of the week. They can take those critical workloads, they can spin them up into Azure, spin them up into GCP, shut down their data center, and head to Nebraska. And then after the storm, is passed, they can bring those workloads back down because we can do the reverse as well too. So anyway, a lot of really cool use cases for our Protege functionality, really kind of helping customers with that kind of trek, that journey to the cloud. So as far as boring PowerPoint slides, that's all I had. I actually wanted to kind of dive into the product here, if that's all right with everybody.
It's always all right. Though I think it was important to set the perspective of where HYCU has come from and the problems that they're ultimately solving and for whom they're solving those problems. But yeah, let's dig in. Feel free to go as deep as you'd like. Just from a time perspective, you probably have 35 minutes to kind of walk through this, and then we can jump back in and have a Q&A.
Sounds great. There's a lot more than 30 to 35 minutes worth of stuff I could cover, so I'll try and keep it a little bit shorter. But I will start with the on-prem kind of enterprise, what we call enterprise cloud version of HYCU. This is what's going to run in your data center, and it is deployed, as I said, just as a virtual machine, right? So it's a disk image. You don't have to be a Linux admin to install it. It's literally a disk image that you can deploy into vCenter through an OVA file, or through Nutanix through a QCOW2 image that you put into the image service. You deploy a VM from it. The only thing you do on the console is give it the network information. I just need IP address, gateway and that kind of stuff. And then everything else is managed through the HTML5 interface. Then once you get HYCU up and running, which I'm not joking, takes 15 minutes, you come into the sources here, and this is where we're going to get our VM data. Where are we going to get our the workloads we're trying to protect? We'll go to the hypervisor tab here, and you're going to add whatever clusters that you're looking to protect. And one thing that I want to note here is the fact that we've got 4 different clusters, but we've got multiple hypervisors in just the way they're installed here. So we've got a native vCenter, vSphere looks like 6.5 instance here, or cluster that we're protecting. We've got Nutanix running ESX as the hypervisor, and then we've got a couple of Nutanix HV clusters as well. And we can back up all of these at the same time from one single HYCU VM. And on top of that, we can do the restores, not only to the original cluster that they came from, but to any other cluster, regardless of hypervisor. So we'll handle that conversion for you. So we've actually had customers who've used HYCU as a migration tool to go from, Nutanix to VMware, VMware to Nutanix, back and forth, because we handle that hypervisor conversion. And it's really kind of a cool, set it up in one environment, restore in another. People that use test dev on a different infrastructure than they do in their production, right? Pretty straightforward. A nice feature that we also integrate with, this is one that I often overlook, and I want to make sure that I don't do that, is Nutanix files. If you've used Nutanix files to replace your Windows file servers, your Linux file servers, or NAS file share services and everything, we integrate very tightly with Nutanix files. And our differentiator here is the fact that our engineering folks and Nutanix's engineering folks collaborated on Nutanix files, what they call the change file tracking API. The heck is the change file tracking API? Well, basically, if you think of the way you back up file shares today, right? You hit the share, you start walking through the tree of the files and folders, and you back everything up, and then incremental time comes tomorrow, right? Need to do it again. Has this changed? Has this changed? Has this changed? It takes a long time to go through all that directory structure in order to find the content that's changed, right? With Nutanix files, they are actually tracking all of those edits on the front end. So somebody connects to their department share or whatever and edits a PowerPoint, or collaborating on a Word document or something like that. As that file changes, Nutanix is noting it. So when we, HYCU, come along, we hit that API and say, hey, last time when we talked, this is what I had. What's changed since the last time you and I talked? And they hand us the list of everything that's changed. We back up everything that's changed just in a couple of minutes, rather than having to walk through all of that and take hours and hours and hours to do it. We've actually got one government agency, one of the 3-letter agencies. We're not allowed to talk about who they are, but they are probably listening now, so it won't matter. They've got petabytes of photo and video type data that we were in a bidding to try and protect their Nutanix files environment. Nobody else could even back it up. We did our initial backup, which took however many days it took to back up, but then our incrementals are literally running in less than a half an hour. Nobody else could get through the incremental before the next job was supposed to kick off. So the point being, having that information on the front end is how we're kind of magically backing up these Nutanix files environments. So I didn't mean to spend a whole lot of time on there. There's not really much to show, but I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that as far as a differentiator. Lastly, too, if you do have physical machines in the environment, we can back up physical machines again without the need for a HYCU client, no agent or anything like that. We're using native tool sets in Windows, in Linux, to be able to back up those machines, those physical machines. We're usually using it as kind of a P2V tool, so you can back up the physical servers and you can restore them into your VM or restore them into your Nutanix environment from the physical machine. So we do support certain versions of Windows. I think it's Server 2012 and newer, and then some distributions of Linux as well too, if you have physical servers that you need to protect as well. So let's dive into it here. You connect up to those sources, you point to our clusters, and we automatically then just discover all the VMs that are running in that environment, right? If you have multiple clusters, we'll tell you which cluster this came from. If they're physical machines, we'll note that here. This list is refreshed every 5 minutes. We hit the APIs again back to Prism, or we hit the APIs to vCenter to grab a new list of VMs, so that as your admins are creating new machines in the environment, in fact, there it goes right now. Apparently hit the 5 minutes. As the VMs are being created in the environment, you don't have to remember to come back into your backup solution, rescan, or add a new server into the solution. We're finding it automatically. And even later, I'll just talk a little bit about that. We give you some mechanisms to control what happens when we find those VMs. Do you want them protected? Do you not want them protected? If so, how? That kind of a thing. Again, so the VMs are discovered. The fact that we're agent-free, the way that we get into the file system, if you need to do a file recovery, you need to put something back into a directory for a user or something like that, is through credentials. Simply in HYCU, you define a set of usernames and passwords that exist in the environment, apply the appropriate credential sets to the appropriate VM, and if we need to do a file restore, we'll just use that account to reach into the file system, drop that file back on the file system. Otherwise, whole VM restores can happen, backups and restores can happen without the need for credential set put on there. Also, when you do apply credentials to the machine, we will automatically detect applications that we support. So you can see here that we've automatically detected, and again, this is something that you don't have to go and specify. We're going to find it and tell you, on this VM, I found SQL running. Do you want to back it up? And if so, tell us, and we'll do that for you. The other thing is, again, we're doing this without the need for an agent. We're using native tool sets. So for SQL Server, we're using all of the SQL Management Studio tools, their whole VDI tool set and VSS and WinRM and PowerShell and all that stuff. Oracle, we're using RMAN. So anyway, native tool sets in all these particular applications, so that we can get application consistent backups of these particular applications. So that's essentially defining what we're backing up, right? The virtual machines, the applications. We can also back up Nutanix volume groups as well as Nutanix files shares, like we talked about. Then we get to the where. Where are we going to write all this data that we're backing up? And this, again, is where we offer just a ton of flexibility. You simply tell us what you want to back up to, define as much storage in the environment as you want. If you've got 3 to 4 different units on-prem, you got cloud storage, you've got something in a colo, you can define all of that within HYCU. Simply add a target, tell us what type we're connecting to, NFS, SMB, is it a Nutanix storage volume? Sorry, scrolling here. Do you have Nutanix objects that you're writing to for worm lockability? Is it iSCSI? We can write to S3 hardware and all 3 public clouds as well. Simply just tell us what type of storage we're writing to, give us a little connection information about it. Tell us if you want to be doing compression on it, or using it for long-term archives, or are you just using it for daily backups, that kind of thing. Do you want to encrypt it? It's simple to set up. Define all that storage, and then the way we tie it all together, the what we're backing up, the where we're sending the backups, is what we call policies. And this is really the guts of the application. It's our answer to creating those elaborate schedules of Sundays at 3 p.m. I want these 12 servers backed up, and Wednesday nights at all that stuff. What we do is we take more of a service level approach. The organization's recovery point objective and recovery time objectives, you're simply going to plug into a policy. So let's say I want to back up every day. I want to have a goal of recovering a VM that's part of this policy within 4 hours, and I want to retain that backup data for 2 weeks. And I'm going to write it out to Exagrid, we'll just say. Done. You've created a policy. Give it a name, apply this policy to whatever VMs that it's appropriate, and we'll start backing it up, meeting this, this metric that you've defined for us. And one of the things that people have asked, well, Juaz, when is it going to run? Well, we're going to run as often as we need to. And the beautiful thing, especially in Nutanix environment, is we aren't using hypervisor initiated snapshots, those VADP snapshots in Nutanix. We're using their V3 APIs at the storage level. So we're taking storage level snapshots rather than initiating hypervisor snapshots, which make those VMs susceptible to that kind of VM stun, that freak out moment of 3 or 4 seconds, which you hope is only 3 or 4 seconds, where the VM kind of goes out to lunch and your monitoring software all goes nuts saying that there's a server down. We're at a layer below that. When we're hitting the storage, the VMs have no idea they're being backed up. So we've got customers that are doing huge production workloads in the middle of the day, and the VMs and the users using them have no idea anything's happening. So we can do all that backup just to meet this objective, right? That's the recovery objective. If you do have a need to make sure that backups aren't running during a particular time, however, you can use backup windows. You can create backup windows and say, I only want my backups running between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. or something like that, to limit when that's going to happen. Some organizations want to make sure that their backups contain a full day's worth of business transactions and things like that, which totally makes sense. So you can lock out certain times to make sure that it's not running. So now you've got a backup written to a local exagrid. Great, let's get that copy off site. Fantastic. You just simply click the copy button here, and a new section opens up down here where you're going to point us to what you want to write to. We're going to write that to Azure storage, and we're going to retain it for 6 weeks. Done. Just like the backup windows, if you've got bandwidth concerns, you can create copy windows. So the way that our backups work is we'll take that initial storage level snapshot, write it off to whatever this first target is. So in this case, exagrid. When the job is complete and we give you the green light, this machine's been backed up and protected. In the background, HYCU kicks off a copy process that sends it to whatever this second target is. And if you want to make sure that bandwidth isn't being utilized at a particular time, you can set up copy windows too, so that that copy process only runs during off hours or only on weekends, or however you want to work that too. But the point is, you've got control over that as well. So now you've got your on-site copy, you've got your off-site copy. Fantastic. If you have need for long-term archives, you can define an archiving tier, cheap and deep storage somewhere, right? You need to run monthlies, you need to run annuals and retain them for months and years. You can enable that on this policy as well, so that as the backups are running, we're testing, oh, is this archive time? If it is, let's do it, knock it out. Pretty straightforward. So I'll touch on just a couple of other features here. I know this isn't super exciting stuff, but I kind of want to get the feature set out there before we expand into the next set here. But I mentioned back at the beginning, when the virtual machines, it would talk about how we refresh the list every 5 minutes, and you can control what happens to them when we find them, right? That's what this auto assignment is. So if you're using vCenter vCenter tags, Prism Central categories, I got to get the technologies correct. You can select this auto assignment option down here, and whatever the essentially key value pair that you've set up for either the tags in VMware or categories in Prism Central, we can find those. As the VM is discovered, we'll look for those tags essentially. If they exist, we go, aha, that belongs in this policy. So if you've got a development environment, somebody spins up a development server, and those will need to be backed up once a week. They create that category, that tag on that machine. We'll discover it. We'll go, it's a development machine. Drop it into this policy, and now it'll be protected just like all your other development machines. Accounting, same thing idea, right? Pretty straightforward. I'll touch on these two. This backup from replica and fast restore are two Nutanix only solutions. So these are integrations with Nutanix. The backup from replica I'll hit first. It's kind of I guess a robo type solution where you've got a central data center where your main production workloads are, but you have these remote offices that maybe just have a smaller number of VMs or some sort of offsite location. And with Nutanix, you can set up protection domains and essentially have those robo machines replicated in to your central data center so that they're there and available, so that if that robo site goes offline, you can take that protection domain with those replicated VMs and bring them online. So what that's effectively doing is replicating that VM data across the wire from that remote office to the central data center. So from HYCU's perspective, we were like, well, we have two options. We can install HYCU in the data center, and we can back up those remote VMs, pulling that data across the wire. But we're already doing that as part of the protection domain, right? That's already done. I don't want to pull that data a second time as a backup. It's already there. And the other option, of course, would be to deploy HYCU in some sort of storage in that remote location and kind of add some complexity and a little less central management ability or something like that into that environment. So we decided, well, we're already replicating the VMs in, we'll just back up the replicas sitting in the data center. So now HYCU can actually back up those replicas from that protection domain. If you need to do file level recovery or whole VM recovery, we can do restores on that. We can restore into that central data center, or we can push that data back out across the wire to that remote cluster. Your choice on that. But it's kind of a cool solution to kind of reduce the complexity of backup, save on bandwidth for that kind of thing. Pretty cool Nutanix solution. And the last one I'll touch on is the fast restore, which I've always thought has somewhat of an unfortunate name because it kind of implies that we otherwise restore slowly, which is not the case. Fast restore. So touching back again on our backup methodology, we hit that Nutanix storage level snapshot. We back it up to storage. Incremental time, right? Next backup comes on. We take those two snapshots and we compare them with each other. What has happened at the block level that's changed? Here's the blocks that have changed. We're going to write those out as our incremental. And then our normal course of action is to take that second snapshot and throw it away because we don't need it anymore. We already backed up what's changed. We've got our stuff. We're done. With this fast restore option enabled, however, if we scroll down, we can actually retain a certain number, whatever your desire is here, a certain number of fast restore snapshots in your Nutanix cluster. These are HYCU-owned snapshots. They don't appear in Prism. You can't see them on the VM. We hide them and lock them away so that people don't accidentally mess with them or they don't interfere with other snapshot operations you're doing. But the point is, they're sitting there in the cluster. So now if you have to do a restore, I don't have to pull the data off of my storage. I don't have to go out to this exagrid and pull it across the network or, worse, coming from the cloud or something like that. I can actually do those file restores or whole VM restores even from those fast restore snapshots that are already living in my Nutanix cluster. In fact, the whole VM restores are two API calls. Number one, we tell Nutanix to shut down and delete the bad VM and then just power on a new one from this snapshot. And it takes about 20 seconds from the time you hit the restore button to the time that the console's booting. So that's where it gets the name Fast Restore. So that's kind of what that feature is. And I know I covered a lot here. It's kind of, my nerdometer kind of goes off on some of this stuff. So I hope it wasn't too dry and too boring, but kind of wanted to make sure I got some of the feature sets in there. So I'll move a little quicker right now because I do want to talk a little bit about cloud. So we've got our VMs backed up now. So let's take a look at this particular VM. We've got all of our different recovery points. So if you do need to do a restore on these, select the recovery point that you want. You want to do a whole VM restore, we can do that. Blow over the top of the VM, get rid of the old one, bring on the new one. We can actually take this restore point, this backup image, and we can clone it. We can create a brand new VM. And this is where I mentioned you can restore cross hypervisor. So if you've got a VMware cluster and a Nutanix cluster, you can actually do this. Where you create a brand new VM and say, rather than in my Nutanix HV cluster, I want to put it in my ESX cluster somewhere else here. So you just find your cluster, you find your storage volume, whichever VMFS partition you want to put it on, and there you go. Give it some hardware information if you want to change network adapters so you don't VLANs, things like that, so you don't have IP conflicts, do that as well too. And then you just restore it. And we'll provision a brand new VM from that. Also on the VM restores, I failed to mention our support for vDisks. So if you've got a situation where the OS is fine, but the D drive with the application or database or something on it running, that was the part that got messed up. We can just restore that whole disk. Moreover, we can actually do cloning of disks. So take that D drive and rather than restore it back to the original VM, say, no, I actually want to restore it to this server instead. I want you to take that D drive, that disk, and attach it to this VM. Tell us what storage container, and off to the races. This is something else that comes into play in our cloud environment too that is really cool because you can actually restore disks across projects from different environments too. So at any rate, and then of course, file level recovery. I've seen some interesting solutions in this in my day. So a couple of ways where people were doing file level recovery, right? There was the here's a read-only catalog of everything I've backed up. Go select the files that you want to recover. I will then start searching through the backup, trying to find that stuff. And I'll let you know when I found it and restored it all, right? I've also seen solutions that will deploy kind of a proxy VM or a helper VM in the environment and say, here's the file system I've put on this VM, you go get what you want, we'll restore it back. The whole idea of a proxy VM where they're putting the files on there, we're not doing that. We're reading the backup image directly off the storage. We're going to mount the file system directly to our appliance. You browse the tree on whatever it is you want to restore, you want to recover, tell us where and how you want to recover it, and off to the races here. So let's say here, in the root directory here, they've got their bash profile. I'll just say my bash profile needs to be restored. Somehow that got messed up. When you're doing the recovery, restore back to the VM, we actually can restore across VMs to like OS. So this is a Linux machine. So you can restore to other Linux machines in the environment if you want to. Typical options that you'd see with alternate locations, overwrite, rename, so forth. We can restore files back to some completely independent NFS SMB share. We don't have to restore back to a VM at all. Or the files that you've selected, you can actually zip up. We can download them in your browser, put them on your desktop, send them off to Dropbox, upload a server logs or something to a support portal that they're having to troubleshoot some sort of an issue or something. Anyway, a lot of options there. And I'll touch real quickly here on applications. Let's just use SQL as an example. Again, with the fact that we're able to effectively back these up natively through credentials and using the tool sets on the machines. In SQL, for example, you have the option of restoring the entire VM just like you would on the other screen here to this restore point. Getting down to that database level, we can restore the entire instance of SQL, just like file recovery here. If you've got multiple SQL servers, if we backed up the SQL database on the 005 server, we can actually restore it to another SQL server that we're aware of. And then if you want to get to that point in time, you can select a particular database, tell us, based on logs, you're like, this is when the bad thing happened. And so we'll just restore to this particular second in time. We'll do the whole restore the database, play the transaction logs forward, and bring the database back online from there. And then just the last things I like to touch on real briefly here is some of the nice add-on features that, well, I say they're normally add-on. A lot of times we see upcharges. Sometimes even separate machines that have to be built to handle some of this stuff. Reporting being one of them. We give you a ton of reporting capability here. All these ones with little purple ribbons are pre-built reports that come with the product. But we give you a real powerful, easy to use drag and drop. Here's the fields I want to report on. Build my own report so you can do your own tables and things like that. We do bar charts, line charts, and so forth. If you'd rather look at, let's see if I've got one here that's a little prettier. There we go. You want to look at pictures rather than words like I do, you can totally do that. These can be run on demand, or if you want, if you've got some sort of regular reporting metric, you can schedule these to run on a regular basis, have them emailed to whoever needs to know in a couple different formats, and you're good to go there. Self-service, this is kind of our responsibility delegation, I guess you could say. So if you've got a help desk team, or if you've got a DevOps team that's kind of responsible for their own machines, or you want to delegate some of the responsibilities, you can create groups within HYCU, add users to them either on the appliance itself, or we do integrate with LDAP and Active Directory. So you can select users from those, give them different roles, different abilities. If you want them to only be able to do restores, you only want them to be able to do backups, things like that. You can add them to those groups, and if you come back to your virtual machines here, and this is the same as is true here for the applications and the file shares as well too. But you can take this owner column here and you can assign those groups to these resources. And what that means is then, since I'm a member of both, I can switch users. I log in as one of those DevOps users. I'm only seeing the resources that are available to me. On top of that, if I look at policies, for example, I only see the policies that are applicable to my resources. I can't create new ones. I can't edit this one. I can only see what they do. We even took the targets tab, where the storage is defined over here. We take that away so that you don't have people messing with your storage. But the point here being, they can come in and perform their own restores. Or if it's a lab environment, hey, we got to upgrade our lab environment to some new application version. I want to take a backup of the environment beforehand. They can kick off their own one-off backups. They can do their own restores if that upgrade blows up. Anyway, it's kind of a cool way to take some of the load off of the IT staff that is managing your backups, right? You can kind of delegate some of that responsibility to them as needed. The last thing I want to show, and actually I will flip over to my home environment for this just because I have the new version. We just released a brand new version today. So let's say you're going to be doing an upgrade. If you remember back from those slides and from the very start of this this kind of discussion here, HYCU is a single VM. We don't have a whole bunch of moving parts. So when it's time to upgrade this one appliance, it's only one piece you got to touch, right? And rather than downloading some upgrade package and you set up and next, finish kind of a thing, if we look down here on the lower left, I don't know if you can see it or not, it's pretty small. We're running version 4.3.0. So 4.3.1 just came out today. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the HYCU website, going to download a brand new 4.3.1 VM image. We'll put that into our image service in Nutanix or as the OVA file in vCenter. We'll come in here and we'll say software upgrade, and we will actually look in those repositories for the new version. And so we'll simply select this, hit software upgrade, and it takes 3 steps that it does really. And it does it in about, my youngest son and I, we did it here in my home environment a couple months ago when 4.3.0 came out. It took about 7 minutes and 20 seconds, and it was all done. But what we do is 3 steps. Number 1, we deploy the brand new version as a VM. We'll take that disk image and we'll deploy a VM in the environment. Then on your existing HYCU VM, there's a second disk that contains all of that database containing all your reporting, your storage definitions, your backup history, all that stuff. We clone that disk, just like you did in the restore tab that I was showing before. Clone the disk and attach it to the new VM. So all that data and history and everything like that gets cloned from the old VM onto the new one, shut down the old VM, and we power on the new one. Like I said, it takes less than 10 minutes. You're up on the new version, and we don't even delete the old version. So if for whatever reason, you bring on the new one and something doesn't look right, you can just simply shut down the new VM and turn your old one back on, and you're right back where you were because we don't touch any of that data. It's a great rollback. Great rollback option there. So anyway, that I know that was a ton of information, and I tend to talk a little bit like I'm trying to auction something off at Sotheby's, but that is kind of the HYCU on-prem version. The cloud versions are going to be very, very similar. You'll notice in our on-prem version here, there's actually a couple of these VMs that have these funky little icons after them. This is those machines that we license for that what we call Protege, and that's that spin-up capability where we can take these VMs, the backup images from them. We've written the data to Azure. We've written it to Google in terms of, so if you look at this backup status, this is really small. I'm sure nobody can read this, but in the lower right-hand corner, it shows that our initial target was a Synology storage device, and then the secondary target was Google Cloud. And so we've got a copy of the backups of this VM sitting in Google storage. You'd asked about configuration. So if you come in here into cloud accounts, this is where you're going to define, for Azure, your various service principals telling us what we have access to. And same thing here for Google. If you've got service accounts that you can give us basically the window into the environment that you want us to be able to utilize. So again, if you've got a big cloud environment and you don't have to give us the keys to the kingdom, you create whatever project you want us to use and you simply give us the window into that environment. That's all we need. We aren't trying to be intrusive or anything like that, but you simply create and configure your cloud accounts here. If you're talking about how we're writing the data to Azure in the first place, that's pretty straightforward here. When you create the target itself, you tell us that it's an Azure target. Give us the storage account information, the container secret key that you get from your Azure environment, and simply plug that in here, and that's all we need to write data to the cloud. So that's one thing. It's a good point of differentiation too. Protege for that spin up functionality, which I was just about to get into, is an add-on license. So again, you've got a huge VM environment, but a subset of those VMs are what's critical, that are business critical to keep the organization running, right? Those are the ones you're going to want to license for that Protege functionality, which allows you then to hit this spin up button. But if you just want to write your backup data to the cloud, you don't need Protege. You don't need to spend the extra licensing costs at all on that Protege functionality. You can write all of your VM backup data to Google storage, and there's no HYCU costs associated with that at all. So it's just whatever whatever tier you're writing to in those cloud environments. Does that make sense? Or hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, I think it absolutely did. Look, I actually want to just do a quick time check, so we have about a little less than 10 minutes. Is there anything more you want to share that you feel important to get to in the next couple of minutes, and then we can pop into some questions? And honestly, I think you've done a pretty good job of answering a few of the ones that we've already gotten.
Excellent. I tend to be wordy. I do apologize if I'm a little over detailed. Yeah, if I could just take another 2 minutes, and we'll jump into this. I did want to show that spin up functionality. You're picking that backup image, that restore point you want to pull from, and you're going to tell me that I want to put it into Google Cloud. And this is where you'll select based on what you've entered in that cloud accounts directory. Then we get the window into the environment. You simply tell us what project you're going to go to, what region of the world you're spinning it up in, so forth. The next screen, we ask a little bit about, hardware. What type of machine are we talking about? Is it a small? They've got their templates and things like that you can select from. The virtual machine types. That's what I was trying to come up with. The E2 and all that stuff. So select your machine type that you want to spin up, change your cores and memory. You want to connect to a different network interface in your cloud environment, you can do that and hit spin up. And that's when we hit those APIs to kick off that part. So to do that conversion from that at-rest data to a running VM. So just real fast, and I know I'm kind of a little embarrassed that I didn't leave enough time to really cover this in greater depth, but again, we have native solutions that look very similar to our on-prem solution for HYCU that run in Google and Azure, and like I said, soon to come in Q1 for AWS as well. If you come to either Google or Azure into the marketplace, if you just simply search for HYCU, we're the only thing there. We've got a 14-day trial if you want to look at it and play with it. You can do that. We give you the pricing right on the page here, so it tells you how much it's going to cost you if you do actually start backing things up. Otherwise, it's free to have parked in there. So once you do subscribe, you're going to get access to the HYCU for, in this case, GCP, or HYCU for Azure. You're going to use your Google or your Microsoft account information on those environments. We use all of their IAM integration, Azure AD, and things like that. And here's the cloud product. It probably looks a little familiar to you, right? Same idea here, where in order to gain access, you're just going to tell us which service accounts you want to make use of so that we know what VMs you want to protect. If you have multiple projects, you can define protection sets. So if you've got projects that are interrelated, or that are essentially two sides to a coin or something like that, you can create a protection set and group projects together in a protection set, so that when you're on this screen, you can tell which production set you want to look at, right? Which set of VMs am I looking at? And again, automatic discovery of VM instances, automatic discovery of applications, and this is actually kind of key. This is new functionality for us here. Let me sort by type here. We have support for GKE now. So if you have containerized applications and things that are running, we have the ability to natively protect those in an application consistent state. So in addition to the VM level, being able to do all the operations you saw before with disk cloning, VM cloning, full VM restores, file level restores, all of that can be done in the cloud environments as well. And in Google, we do have our application, our Kubernetes support, so where you can restore the entire application. If you've got persistent volumes that you want to maintain, you can select all or individual ones that you can restore. And then additionally, if you do have individual resource files, somebody completely overwrote and trashed your YAML files or something, you can get in there and actually restore those individual files. Same concept here, where you've got your VM instances, you've got buckets that we can discover, define storage in Google that you want to write to, just like you did in the on-prem version, tie it all together with policies. And the policies are very similar. We can take snapshot-based backups, which that's honestly what we see a lot. People are just using snapshots. They're like, well, I've got backup. I use snapshots. Yeah, that's true. They're expensive. So if you want to use snapshots, you can use them. You can use them through HYCU and say, I only want to keep the snapshots. I want to back up, let's say, every day, but I only want to keep the snapshots for 5 days. And after that, I want you to send a copy out to storage tier where it's cheaper to maintain. And so then we'll automatically handle all that expiration for you. But you can also write both copies to storage. So anyway, same idea here with all the other features, reporting and so forth that's available. And that is true of Azure as well as Google. And like I said, again, AWS functionality, all this is coming here in Q1 of next year. So that's sort of, again, really brief because we're running out of time, but there you go. That's our HYCU for Google, HYCU for Google solutions.
This is what I'm talking. This is why I love these spotlight events, because you just get a lot of information in a short period of time, and you did a great job there powering through. And
then I need a drink of water.
No, it's great. We do have a question regarding data protection in the case Azure, Google Cloud, et cetera, suffer an outage.
Sure. So through, we're plugging into a particular bucket, and if you've got that bucket defined in multi-region, you can do that. You can also create different buckets. So if you want to have an archive tier in one region or another region, we can do that as well. In terms of the Google and Azure solutions, it's kind of the same concept. One thing I didn't even point out really is we don't deploy anything into your project or into your tenant in Azure or Google. All of this is a complete solution as a service. We're just using APIs, and the access that you gain into your data stays in your project. So if you're going to be doing multi-region, we'll honor that. So a lot of that configuration in terms of multi-region, if you have an entire region go down, a lot of that is handled through the configuration that you've got basically set up in your cloud environment as well, and we just simply work with it. Not sure if that answered the question, but that's kind of how it works from our perspective.
No, that's good. Look, one more before we wrap up. You're obviously talking to prospects and clients every day. Where are you finding traction? Who's coming to you? The levels in organizations. What are I know it's hard to say this is it, but give us a couple of examples, or maybe a little bit of a range of kind of what you're seeing most often. It's
funny. So I've been with HYCU now just over a year, and I really went into it with the expectation that we were going to see all manufacturing. We were going to see all enterprise law firms. I don't know. We're going to see something, and it is really across the map. We've got customers that are in federal space. We've got Major League Baseball, for example, is using our Google Cloud solution. We've seen manufacturing, we've seen healthcare. I mean, we're all over the place. And in terms of who I'm talking to on a regular basis, generally speaking, it's IT management. Not often into the C levels or anything like that. But it's the people who actually feel the pain of what they're doing now. These are the guys that are having to deal with a staff that is just bogged down with having to deal with data protection, and maybe they've recently had some sort of a ransomware attack, and they're still kind of reeling from that and the resources that it took to recover from it, and being able to kind of talk to them about maybe a simpler way of doing this, and having the aha moment is those are the people that I'm generally kind of talking to on a day-to-day basis. But in terms of verticals and even on the org chart, it's kind of all over the map, but we're talking to everybody.
Well, I know there's you showed briefly a quick way for you to get started on the cloud sites. There's obviously calls to action and a free trial on the HYCU website itself.
Yep.
And I think the best thing to do for folks is to basically reach out when they want to learn a little bit more, and they'll get to talk to somebody who's got it going on like yourself, and then they can make a decision from there.
They're smarter people than me, but yeah, that work at HYCU. But honestly, yeah, that's true. We've got a contact form. If you just fill out that, hey, I want to see a demo, there's a form there that says I want to see a demo, whatever. We'll get you in contact with either myself or somebody that's local to the region that you're in, and we'll get you hooked up. We'll start the conversation for sure.
Well, Alan, thanks very much. That was a great job. Large flow of information for our folks, which is, again, what we want to see when we do a spotlight event. So, again, thank you.
I really appreciate you having me here, and really appreciate you guys putting a spotlight on HYCU today. So thanks very much.
You bet. Well, there you have it, a solutions review spotlight featuring HYCU. We want to thank HYCU for being a part of this event, and thank Alan for doing such a good job presenting the solution. And we also want to thank you for being a participant. If you're interested in more about HYCU, you should certainly visit their website. And if you're interested in more about this space, you should go to solutionsreview.com and check out all the other events we have coming up. I'm Doug Atkinson. Thanks for being with us.